I've received a number of questions lately about how dualistic practices like prayer and deity worship can be performed by the followers of the non-dualistic teachings of Advaita Vedanta. Those teachings declare that Brahman alone exists, and that seems to deny the very existence of individual worshippers and a god to be worshipped. This apparent contradiction leads some people to wrongly conclude that Advaita Vedanta rejects the validity of prayer and worship altogether. This misconception is usually addressed by referring to the foremost teacher of Advaita Vedanta, Adi Shankara, who composed many devotional hymns in praise of various deities, hymns like his popular Bhaja Govindam. And Shankara personally established temples for worship at his 4 mattas, or monastic centers, and elsewhere. Also, Shankara himself promoted the performance of rituals, like Panchayatana Puja, in which 5 deities are worshipped: Ganesha, Shiva, Vishnu, Devi, and Surya. Yet, some people question the historical accuracy of all that. After all, Shankara lived more than 1,200 years ago, and much of the literature about his life is highly embellished. So, in this video, instead of relying on debatable historical evidence, we will turn to Shankara's own teachings to determine whether they support or reject dualistic practices of prayer and worship. Shankara famously wrote, Brahma Satyam, jagan Mithya. Brahman is Satyam, absolutely real. Brahman is the uncreated, non-dual, fundamental reality because of which everything exists. Brahman is the unchanging substratum of the constantly changing world. On the other hand, Jagat, the world, is Mithya, false. Here, false means that the world you experience each day is not as real as Brahman. Unlike Brahman, the world was created, and it's constantly changing. More than that, the very existence of the world depends on Brahman as its underlying substratum. Shankara himself explained all this using a metaphor based on a clay pot. The existence of this pot depends on clay, but the existence of clay itself doesn't depend on the pot. If the pot gets broken into little bits, clay still exists. In this metaphor, clay is said to be Satyam, real, independently existent, whereas this pot is said to be Mithya, meaning that it's not as real as clay, in the sense that it depends on clay for its existence. In Advaita Vedanta, the word Mithya is used to denote a lower order of reality. For example, a pot you imagine in your mind is less real than this one. The world you experience in a dream is less real than this world. And, according to Shankara, the world you experience right now is less real than Brahman. Shankara never used the word Mithya to suggest that the world is merely an illusion or a dream. Vedantic scholars like Shankara don't define Mithya as being unreal or illusory. Instead, they define Mithya as adhishthana ananyatvam, a state of dependent existence. Let me explain. This pot is not an illusion, nor is this body, this chair, or everything in this room. Yet, the existence of all that depends entirely on Brahman. None of it is independently existent. None of it is as real as Brahman. For this reason, it's said to belong to a lower order of reality. So, Mithya is a highly subtle concept that can't really be translated by any single English word, including illusion. Now, consider this. The fact that this object is nothing but clay doesn't prevent me from filling it with water and drinking from it. So even though the pot is not as real as clay, we can say that the pot coexists with clay, in a manner of speaking. This metaphor shows how the world of duality can indeed coexist with non-dual Brahman, but at a lower level of reality. Non-dual Brahman doesn't completely deny or negate the dependent existence of the world, nor does non-dual Brahman completely deny or negate the existence of God, Ishvara, or the existence of any deity, incarnation, or personification of Ishvara. If this is understood properly, there's no conflict whatsoever between non-dual Brahman and worldly dualities. Dualities like worshipper and worshipped, deity and devotee, God and man. All these dualities coexist with Brahman, but at a lower order of reality. We can use this teaching to understand how prayer and worship are practiced by followers of Vedanta. Let's look at the questions now. Our first question is from Elka, who lives in Miami, Florida. She asks, how to reconcile Advaita Vedanta's teaching that God is one and has no form or attributes with various incarnations of God, like Rama and Krishna, who have forms and attributes. When Elka speaks of one God with no form or attributes, I presume she is referring to Brahman. As we just saw, Brahman is the non-dual fundamental reality that gives existence to everything. Everything means everything, including every form or incarnation of God. Brahman gives existence to Rama and Krishna like clay gives existence to pots. In this way, many forms of God can indeed coexist with one formless Brahman, just at a lower level of reality. Next, we have a question from Roshan, who lives in Nepal. Roshan asks, what is the difference between Brahman and Ishvara? When you say God, are you referring to Brahman or Ishvara? And when we pray, do we pray to Brahman or Ishvara? I'm really glad Roshan asked these questions because they show the confusion caused when we use common English words like God instead of more precise Sanskrit words like Ishvara. Ishvara is the name for the Supreme Being, the being who possesses the power to create and sustain the universe, to govern its cycles of manifestation and dissolution, and to bestow blessings upon us according to our deeds. All these powers are considered qualities or attributes of Ishvara. For this reason, Ishvara is sometimes called God with attributes. Scholars refer to Ishvara as Saguna Brahman, Brahman with attributes. This term distinguishes Ishvara from Nirguna Brahman, Brahman without attributes, the non-dual fundamental reality because of which even Ishvara exists. Nirguna Brahman is often referred to simply as Brahman. Brahman is sometimes called the impersonal God, to distinguish it from Ishvara, the so-called personal God. To differentiate Ishvara and Brahman in this way might not be necessary at the very beginning of one's spiritual journey, but eventually it becomes really important. Roshan also asked, when we pray, do we pray to Brahman or Ishvara? Well, you can't pray to a non-dual fundamental reality, the so-called impersonal God. Also, from the standpoint of non-duality, Brahman alone exists, so neither you nor Ishvara exist as independently real beings. On the other hand, you can certainly pray to Ishvara, the supreme being who creates and sustains the world, who governs its cycles, and who bestows blessings on us. Our next question is from Shubhra, who lives in Durgapur, West Bengal. Shubhra says, as human beings, we can only comprehend things we perceive with our 5 senses. So then, how can we pray to a formless supreme being or worship a formless God? Well, it's not exactly true that it's impossible for human beings to comprehend a formless God. Most of us can comprehend things like empty space, or the number 0, or the principle of justice, even though these are all completely formless. For this reason, worshiping Ishvara without form is certainly possible. Yet, many Hindus do indeed find it difficult to conceive of Ishvara without any form whatsoever. The Hindu tradition is unique in that you're allowed to worship Ishvara in many ways, ways that are sakara, with form, and ways that are nirakara, without form. You are completely free to choose the way in which you worship Ishvara, according to your own personal inclinations. Hinduism recognizes the differences among individuals and accommodates their personal religious and spiritual needs. This accommodation is based on an important Hindu doctrine, the principle of adhikari bheda, which loosely means differences among practitioners. If you're not familiar with this principle, please watch my video, If Reality is Non-Dual, Why Are There So Many Gods in Hinduism? You'll find a link below. Many Hindus worship forms of Ishvara like Shiva, Vishnu, and Durga. These deities are described in thousands of stories found in the Vedas, the Puranas, and other scriptures. Each of those stories is full of important religious teachings and spiritual wisdom. Those stories form the basis for the prayers and deity worship practiced by most Hindus. Yet some Hindus, including many followers of Advaita Vedanta, might consider those stories to be mythological in nature and consider all the deities to be symbolic representations of Ishvara's powers. Such people often prefer to pray and worship Ishvara without any particular form. Okay, next question. Akarsh asks, is it okay to worship Ishvara as goddess rather than God? Or should we avoid anthropomorphizing altogether? That's an interesting question. Over the years, I've met many people, especially women, who are completely turned off by the male bias and patriarchy found in many religious traditions, including Hinduism. Those problems aren't surprising because scriptures that were written exclusively by men are likely to be biased in some ways. Fortunately, Hindus are not restricted to worshiping only male forms of God, like in Western religions. Hindus are free to worship female forms of Ishvara, forms like Goddess Durga, Lakshmi, or Saraswati, goddess of knowledge and music. Hindus born in India sometimes take this freedom of worship for granted and fail to perceive the significance of Advaita Vedanta. Akarsh also asked if we should avoid anthropomorphizing Ishvara altogether. Akarsh used an important philosophical term that describes how we often attribute human traits to non-human things. For example, when a cat rubs up against you, you might think that it's expressing love for you. But the fact is, the cat is actually spreading its scent on you because it's driven by an instinct to mark out its territory. Fortunately, there's really no harm in attributing human traits to a cat, especially if it's your beloved pet. The act of anthropomorphizing your cat actually strengthens your relationship with it. This example shows how stories that superimpose human traits on Ishvara, the Supreme Being, can strengthen your relationship with Ishvara and deepen your feelings of devotion, bhakti. Our final question is from Surabhi, who asks, how to choose a deity? Should we ourselves choose, or should we seek the advice of a guru? Well, according to the principle of Advaita Vedanta, you are free to choose any deity that appeals to you. Some Hindus adopt the deity chosen by their mother or father. But to ask a guru which deity you should worship might not be a good idea, because it's such a personal matter. No one knows your mind and heart better than you yourself. If you would like to submit a question for a future video like this one, please send it to me at the address shown at the end. Be sure to indicate video question in the subject line. Also, please join us online for our weekly satsang, live streamed every Sunday.